Oh ja, ne vamale the dossiers.
So, good evening and welcome everyone. So we have completed the section of the text that is dealing with the presentation of the past that are shared with the individual of the small scope. And in our last sessions, someone suggested that we look at the foundation of all good qualities, and Geshe thought that this was an excellent idea. So what we will do tonight is that we will start reading from the foundation of all good qualities, and we will read up to the point of the verses that present the practices that are relevant to the individual of the small scope. Then Geshe will give some explanation on those verses. They're very good verses because they summarize the whole presentation, the whole practice. And once we finish this, then we will go back into our, let's say, normal presentation. And then once we complete the middle scope, we will revisit again the foundation of all good qualities and identify the verses that are relevant to that. Yes. All right, so actually, in order to engage these texts, we need to go to our initial root outlines, and the basic outlines that we have in the Lamrim is how to properly rely on the guru, the root of the path, and then the second outline is how to train once you have relied on the guru. So just some general information about the foundation of all good qualities is a text that is composed by Lama Tsongkhapa. It's a text that presents in a very condensed way the entire way of the experience of the meditation along the path. And also it is said that it is a text through which we can we make the request by combining the request and receiving the blessings. So what we mean by this is, like, sometimes we have a long list of requests to make. So we want to request blessings for this and that and that and the other. So when that happens, we gather everything together and we have like a combined request. So this is what we do basically with the foundation of all good qualities. The foundation of all good qualities is a text that includes the stages of the path and the training of the three individuals. So you could say that it includes the whole training of the perfection vehicle, but then in addition to that, it includes the training of the Vajra vehicle. And this is why it is considered to be such a great, we receive such great blessings from this text. It is a short text. It contains 13 verses. If you add the last verse of dedication, they become 14 verses. But within those verses, it contains the entire points of the path. And this is why we say it is excellent. Once you study more extensively the Lamrim, you induce some certainty. Then after that, you heap together all the requests that you have to make, and you do a quick meditation through relying on the foundation of all good qualities. It's an excellent practice. Okay, so actually, as we say today, we will only engage the material of the individual of the small scope, which is only 4 verses. But before we start with this, it is very good to explain that prior to doing the foundation of all good qualities, it's excellent to recite Gaden Lagema, the 100 deities of Tushita. And this is why, because Gaden Lagema is considered to be the best Guru Yoga according to the Segyu tradition. So first we do Gaden Lagema, and then we recite the Miktsema, a few malas of the Miktsema, and then we do the foundation of all good qualities, and we do this quick meditation on the entire Lamrim. Okay, so we start with the first verse. I'm sorry, I might use a slightly different translation from you. So it says, the foundation of all good qualities is the kind and perfect pure guru. Correct devotion to him is the root of the path. By clearly seeing this and applying great effort, please bless me to rely upon him with great respect. Now, there is a tradition that we actually repeat the last line of those verses a second time. So we say, please bless me to rely upon him with great respect. Please bless me to rely upon him with great respect. The thing is, as we said, that before reciting the foundation of all good qualities, we have recited Gaden Lagema, and that means that we have established the field of accumulation, that visualization in front of us. And the main figure in that merit field or the field of accumulation is, in nature, is our own guru, but in aspect, it has the aspect of Buddha Shakyamuni. So the first time when we do the first recitation of this last line, we visualize that nectar descends from the main figure and enter within us. And with this one, we do the correct we do the meditation in order to correctly rely upon the teacher. When we recite it for the second time, we see that a replica of the main figure in front comes and dissolves within us. And with this, we think that we have actually received that blessing and we are capable of perfectly relying on the spiritual teacher. Now, since we are beginners, it is necessary that we have a little gap between the first and the second recitation. So the first time you recite the verse, you stop a little bit and you bring into mind, okay, what am I visualizing? What am I requesting? What is happening now? Once you establish this and you're ready, then recite this last line for a second time. And again, spend a little bit of time to meditate on receiving that blessing, the guru dissolving into you, and so forth. Okay. Later on, when we become familiar with this, we can just recite it quickly without needing to have a break between the two repetitions. But at the beginning, it's good to give ourselves the time to do these visualizations properly. Okay, so if we actually look at the first verse, we mentioned that if we look at the main outlines of the Lamrim, the first outline is how to properly rely on the teacher, that is the root of the path, and the second one is how to train once you have properly relied. So this first verse is all about proper reliance on the teacher. It begins by saying the foundation of all good qualities is the kind and perfect pure guru. So here when we talk about all qualities, we talk about mundane qualities, ordinary qualities, and supramundane qualities. So we say that the foundation, the basis, or in other words, the root, the origin of all these qualities is the guru, is the proper reliance upon the guru. And therefore it becomes very important for us to understand this, to clearly see this, right? So it says correct devotion to him is the root of the path. We have to devote ourselves in terms of thought and in terms of action. By clearly seeing this, meaning having come to see, having come to understand how important it is to properly rely upon the guru, then by applying great effort, meaning through all the means possible in terms of my attitude, in terms of all my actions, I will apply great effort in order to properly rely. I will rely in this way. Please bless me to be able to do so. So when we come now to the last line where it says, please bless me to rely upon him with great respect, as we say, the first recitation is all about receiving the purifying nectars. So from the main figure of the field of accumulation in front of us, the main figure has the aspect of Buddha Shakyamuni, but we understand him to be the nature of our root guru with whom we have a direct Dharma connection. So we see that 5 color rays of light radiate from his body and they enter within our own body. All our negativities and obscurations, not just myself, but all other sentient beings, are removed. Not just the general negativities and obscurations, but in particular here, negativities and obscurations that become obstacles to us to properly rely upon the teacher. All those things are removed. Our body becomes clear and transparent, and our lifespan, our health, our qualities, our realizations, all of those things increase. So as we're doing this, as we recite it for the first time and we receive those purifying nectars, at this point, we should do a quick meditation. This quick meditation is meditation on how to properly rely on the spiritual teacher. So at this point, we should bring into mind the characteristics of the fully qualified teacher, the characteristics that the students has when they rely on the teacher, the benefits of relying, the disadvantages of not relying, and so forth. However, if you're not capable of doing such a complicated or detailed meditation on the proper way to rely on the teacher, you can just do a quick meditation just by relying on the words of this first verse that we have here. So it can be a bit more simplified. So this happens through the first recitation, and then when we do the second recitation, we visualize that a replica of the root guru comes and dissolves into us. Okay, we continue with the second verse. It says, understanding that the precious freedom of this rebirth is found only once, is greatly meaningful, and is difficult to find again. Please bless me to generate the mind that unceasingly, day and night, takes its essence. So as we say, from the main outlines, we have done the first outline of the Lamrim, which is the proper way to rely upon the teacher. And the second one is how to train on the path once you have relied on the teacher. On this second one, which is how to actually train on the path, we see that we have again two outlines. The first outline is exhortation, or, inspiring you, urging you to extract the essence of this life. And the second one is the actual way of extracting the essence. So here with the second verse of the foundation of all good qualities, we are dealing with the first of those subheadings, which is exhortation, to have the wish to extract the essence of this life. Okay, so as you can see here, we're in the second verse, and what we want to do is we want to ignite that wish to extract the essence of this life. So in order to make us have this aspiration to do something to extract the essence of this life, first of all, we have to identify this type of rebirth that we have, the quality that it is precious, then identify that it is greatly meaningful, and thirdly, that it is very hard to find. So if you look at the actual lines of the verse, the first one talks about understanding that the precious freedom of this rebirth is found only once. So he's talking about freedoms and endowments. He's identifying the qualities of the precious human rebirth. Then it says is greatly meaningful. It means, you can do serious things with this, and it is difficult to find. So first of all, you have to appreciate it. Once you understand that it is greatly meaningful, then you understand that you must do something with this life. You must achieve things with this life. And the third one that it says is hard to find, it makes you think that if I am to do something with this life, I better do it right now. So the conclusion for that is that I don't want to waste this life that I have, and therefore night and day I will take its essence. It is very important that we do this meditation on how hard it is to find this type of precious human rebirth. So we have to consider that it is hard to find due to its nature, due to its cause, and by means of the example. And having done this type of quick meditation, we reach the conclusion that says, I will definitely extract the essence of this life. And then we say, please bless me to be able to do this. And as we make the request with the first repetition of that line that says, please bless me to generate that mind, we visualize the descent of nectar. It is purifying nectar. It will remove all obstacles and negativities that stops us from having this realization of the precious human rebirth. And then with the second recitation, we will visualize that we have a replica of the guru coming and dissolving into us. And when this happens, we have the confidence that we have indeed generated this type of realization. Okay, we continue with the next verse. It's the third verse. This life is as impermanent as a water bubble. Remember how quickly it decays and death comes. After death, just like a shadow follows the body, the results of black and white karma will follow. So the first, we say that we're dealing with two outlines. The first one is how to generate the wish to extract the essence. And the second outline is the actual way of extracting the essence. So once you have understood how meaningful and precious this life is, you will want to extract the essence. And the way that you do this is by engaging the training of the individuals of the three scopes. So you will do it by engaging the paths that are common with the individual of the small scope, the paths that are common with the individual of the middle scope, and the path of the individual of the great scope. All right, so if as you can see here, it begins with a meditation on death and impermanence. Because if you actually remember death, you will develop this mind that is concerned about the next life. So you will stop being preoccupied with the affairs of this life, and you will start thinking about preparing for your next life. So in order for this to happen, we have the first two lines that says, life is as impermanent as a water bubble. Remember how quickly it decays and death comes. So we need to have this recollection of death and impermanence, and remember that we only have a very short time to remain in this life. So we have said that we need to contemplate death and impermanence in order to generate this attitude that is more preoccupied with the next life. And once we do this, the next two subheadings that we have is how to go for refuge, that is the door to the Dharma, and how to generate conviction on the law of cause and effect, the faith of conviction in the law of cause and effect. And this is what we have here with the remaining two lines of the third verse, and then the whole verse that follows after that. So it says, after death, just like a shadow follows the body, the results of black and white karma follow. So this here, having considered death, we remember, or we have recognition of what will happen at the time of death. So at the time of death, we don't become non-existent. Consciousness will separate from the body. It will leave the body behind, and consciousness will continue. But as it says here, the results of black and white karma will follow the same way that a shadow follows the body. So our consciousness will constantly be followed by the results of those black and white karmas. If we have created negative karma, the results will not be good. If we have created positive karma, the results will be good. And when we talk about bad and good results, this actually translates into rebirths into the lower migrations and rebirths into the higher migrations. Although right now we have not established a bad rebirth, however, we have created and we have accumulated all the causes that can lead to a bad rebirth. And once we take that bad rebirth, the suffering that we will experience there will be unbearable. So bringing into mind that suffering that awaits us, we generate that fear for the suffering, and at the same time we have the conviction that the objects of refuge have the power to protect us. So this is how we go for refuge. So actually, the lines that say, after death, just like a shadow follows the body, the results of black and white karma follow. Finding firm and definite conviction on this, these three lines are the lines that correspond to going for refuge. Although we do not have actual words that say, I go for refuge. However, this is the contemplation, the way that we think that leads us to go for refuge. And after that, it says, please bless me to always be careful to abandon even the slightest negativities and accomplish all virtuous deeds. So these are the 3 lines that correspond to the presentation of karma. All right, so we have to, understanding how the law of cause and effect works, we have to always be very conscientious and very alert, always remember these points of karma, and therefore make the effort to establish even the slightest virtue and to avoid even the slightest negativity. So this is how we have the practices of going for refuge and the presentation of the law of cause and effect. And this is how we have in those verses the material that is presented in the individual of the small scope. These are the practices of the individual of the small scope as they are included within the foundation of all good qualities. So if we look at these 4 verses of the foundation of all good quality, you can see that the first verse is all about the proper way to rely upon the spiritual teacher. The second verse is the verse that talks about the precious human rebirth, all those characteristics of the precious human rebirth. And the reason why it does this, because it's by considering the precious human rebirth that motivates us, it urges us to want to extract the essence of this life. And then the following 2 verses is actually engaging in doing something in order to extract this life. And we begin doing this by following the path that is shared with the individual of the small scope. This is why in verses 3 and 4, we have the presentation of those typical subjects of the training of the individual of the small scope. So we have death and impermanence. After that, we have refuge, and immediately after that, we have the presentation of karma. So a very important thing here to see that the presentation of karma comes right after taking refuge, because basically that shows that our practice immediately begins by applying this principle of karma, that there are certain activities that are considered to be negative and we should abandon at all costs engaging any negativity, and other activities are positive and we want to begin straight away practicing those things. So this is how we recognize, how we categorize the first 4 verses of the foundation of all good qualities. Okay, so with each one of those verses, you should be able to identify that there is one line that says, please bless me to do this and this. Every verse has this. So the first time that we recite this, we're doing the quick meditation and we visualize the descent of purifying nectars. And with the second repetition, we visualize that a replica of the root guru comes and dissolves into us, and we establish or we accomplish the realization that we are requesting for. Okay, so these are the first 4 verses. And then if you look on the 5th verse, it begins by talking about seeking samsaric pleasures is the root to all suffering and so forth. So from that point onwards, we begin with the training that is common with the individual of the middle scope. So we will not go into that today. After we present the middle scope through our own text, we will return back to the foundation of all good qualities and look at those verses again. So now we're going back to our own text. All right, so we're back into our text. If you actually quickly go to page 12, you can see in bold the main outlines. The actual practice is divided into 4, reflecting on the uncertainty of the time of death, reflecting on the unfortunate rebirth suffering, training in going for refuge, and generating the faith of belief in the law of causality. So really, we're doing this 4th outline. So if you go now into page 14, so because actually we had left a little section unfinished. So as the 4th outline, generating faith of belief in the law of cause and causality. Whilst meditating on the Guru Yidam on the top of your head, contemplate the following Buddha's words. Engaging in causal virtue will only give rise to resultant happiness, and suffering will never arise. Engaging in causal non-virtue will only give rise to resultant suffering, and happiness will never arise. So as you can see here, by referring on the scriptures of the Buddha, we start contemplating the four major principles of karma. The first principle is that karma is definite. So it says if you establish virtuous causes, the only thing that you will get from that is happiness. It is impossible to get suffering. And if you establish causes of non-virtue, then the result you will get for that, it will definitely be suffering. So this is the first principle, that karma is definite. We continue with the next sentence that says, furthermore, although one may have performed just a small causal virtue, if it does not encounter the counterproductive factors, its result will greatly increase. Okay, so that is the second attribute of karma, that karma increases, it multiplies. So even if you do a very small action, it can bring about a very big maturational result. And that makes us think that if it is that we have created some negative karma, it is imperative that we try to confess and purify this before it reaches the full maturation, because by the time it reaches maturation, it could have multiplied quite a lot. And similarly, in terms of virtuous actions, we should not ignore even the smallest virtuous actions, thinking is too small, is too insignificant. You do it and then it multiplies. Okay, so then it continues by saying, if the cause, either virtue or non-virtue, is not performed, the correspondent result of happiness or suffering will not be experienced. So this is the third principle of karma that says you will not meet with results unless you have created the cause. And then it continues by saying, moreover, if the virtues or non-virtuous cause has been performed and the counterproductive factors are not met, since performed acts never get wasted, the correspondent result of happiness and suffering will definitely come about. So here we come to the last one, which is the fourth feature of karma, that karma once created will not go to waste. And we have mentioned here that karma can be very important or can become heavy in terms of the intention, in terms of the basis, in terms of the object, and in terms of the way that we carry out the activity. Okay, so we continue from our root text. We're halfway on page 14. Having generated conviction in what has been proclaimed regarding the strength of actions in terms of the recipient, the attitude, the object, and the support, I will strive in the practice of adopting and discarding, whereby I will engage in the 10 virtues and so forth, even the smallest ones, and I will refrain from actions that sullied the 3 doors, like the 10 non-virtues and so forth, even the smallest ones. So up to here, we have contemplated all the principles of the law of cause and effect, and we reach the determination that I will avoid even the smallest negativity. I will practice every virtue, and we conclude by saying, I beseech you, Supreme Guru Yidam, bless us so that we can practice in this way. So due to this fervent request, from the body of the Guru Yidam at the crown of your head descends nectar together with 5 colors light, which enter in you as well as in all mother sentient beings' bodies and mind. It purifies what hinders this realization. So initially we have the descent of the purifying nectars. And then it says, in particular, imagine that the special realization of this topic is generated in your mind stream. So in this context, we are meditating on generating the realization of faith, of conviction about the law of cause and effect. So after the purifying nectar has gone through you, in the second phase, when the Guru dissolves into you, you visualize that you have generated just that realization of the faith of conviction. Then it continues by saying, although you may have strived in this direction, if you still get sullied by non-virtue due to the intensity of your afflictions and the weakness of your remedies, you should strive in the practice of the confession that includes the four powers. So if you are overpowered by your afflictions and if you do not have enough resistance and some mistakes occur, it is important not to be complacent about it, but to try to confess it and purify it as quickly as possible through the use of the four powers. And then this is the end of the actual session, we're coming to the end of the actual session, and then it says the way to practice the conclusion is as before. So the conclusion is all the dedication prayers that we do. And then after the actual session, we have the period in between sessions. Regarding how to practice during the intervals between sessions, as mentioned above, one should read the scriptures and the commentaries expounding the topic of the stages of the path shared with persons of small capacity. So don't just waste your time and read all sorts of novels or other things in between sessions. You read exactly on that subject. So this concludes the exposition of the stages of the path shared with persons of small capacity. All right, so Geshe said, I'm sorry, we had left a bit of material unfinished because we elaborated on the presentation of karma, but now everything is complete, the text as well as the meaning. So, as we say here, when we are looking at the training of the path that is shared with the individual of the small scope, the first thing that we recognize is the precious human rebirth. We want to recognize the preciousness of this rebirth because we don't want to waste it. If you don't waste it, it means that you are going to seek to extract the essence. You have to extract some benefit out of it. Now, there are some people who will extract a small benefit, others will extract a medium benefit, and others will extract a great benefit. So when you hear that, what that indicates is that at the very least, you should extract some benefit, even if it is a small benefit. That thing you must take out of this life. And the way that we do this is that we actually have to go in a correct way for refuge in the three jewels. Once you go for refuge, you are given some advice. And the basic advice is abandon negativity and practice virtue. So we have to try our best to avoid negativity at any cost. And even if negativity happens, and it happens because we are weak, we are beginners, right? So when negativity happens, it is very important that we do everything we can to purify it. If you do that, you will arrive at the time of death without regret. But if you do not take care of this issue, if you spend your life in a completely careless way and you don't apply any alertness, any conscientiousness, any restraint in your behavior, when you come at the time of death, you will die with a lot of regret. And it's not just the issue of regret at the time of death, it's what will follow after death. Because if you die in this way, having spent your life in this way, after death, you will fall into one of the lower migrations, and there the suffering will be unbearable. It's not just the case that the suffering is very heavy there, but the suffering lasts for a very long time. So when you consider that, you say, I don't want to be reborn in one of those lower migrations. I'm determined I will do whatever it takes to be reborn in a good rebirth as a human or as a god. So this is how you extract some benefit. This is the minimum. This is the small benefit you can extract from this life. Otherwise, if you do not extract even that benefit, it means your life has been wasted, is a very big waste. You have not extracted anything, and that's it. The life is finished. So we're now at the top of page 15, and you can see with the bold letters, we have an important outline, training the mind in the stages of the path shared with person of medium capacity. So how have we arrived at this point. We have arrived at this point because we had a previous outline. Actually, it's on page 8, where we have an exhortation to take full advantage of a life of leisure and opportunity. So this is the precious human rebirth. And then following after that is how to take full advantage of a life of leisure and opportunity. So how to take full advantage comes under those 3 outlines, which is training the mind in the stages of the path of the individual of the small scope. We just finished this. Training in the path that is shared with the individual of the middle scope, and then training in the path of the individual of the great scope. So now we're doing the middle scope. So page 15. As for the second outline, training the mind in the stages of the path shared with a person of medium capacity, it has 2 subdivisions: generating the mind intent on liberation and ascertaining the nature of the path leading to liberation. Okay, so then in the first outline, we're going to have 2, how to practice during the formal meditation session and how to practice during the intervals between sessions. So with the first one, generating the mind that is intent on liberation. So what we were doing before in the training that is shared with the individual of the small scope, we contemplate the suffering of the lower migrations, and we generate that very strong wish that says, I want to avoid, I want to be free from the suffering or from the existence of the lower migrations. Here, when we come to the training of the middle scope, we are seeking to be liberated, but we're seeking to be liberated from the whole of samsara. So we say, even if I obtain a good rebirth, it doesn't mean that I am free for good. Temporarily, I have escaped the suffering of a lower migration. But when the projecting karma of this good rebirth finishes, I'm going to end up back again into a lower migration. So I will have to experience suffering there again. And as long as I don't eliminate the root that makes me take rebirth again and again under the power of karma and afflictions, I will have to go and take another rebirth. And even when I take a good rebirth, even that good rebirth is in the nature of suffering. Ultimately, wherever I take rebirth within samsara, I will have to experience suffering. So now I'm seeking liberation from entire samsara. So this is what it means, generating the mind intent on liberation. Okay, so as we say, we generate the mind that is intent on liberation, and then after this, the next outline is ascertaining the nature of the path leading to liberation. And what that means is, first of all, you generate the intention for liberation, and then you find a path that will lead you to liberation. Okay, so we're going to look at the first one, generating the mind intent on liberation. The first outline, again, is split into 2. How to practice during the formal meditation session and how to practice during intervals between sessions. So for the first one, how to practice during the formal meditation session, we have 3: preparation, actual practice, and conclusion. So regarding the preparation, 1 is meant to make supplication as before, with a prayer ending with, I make a request to you, Buddha Vajradhara, the Supreme Guru Yidam, synthesis of all objects of refuge. So remember here that in the preparation, we have to go through the 6 types of preliminaries. So the first one is to clean the room and arrange representations of the body, speech, and mind of the Buddha. The second one is to arrange beautifully offerings that we have obtained honestly. The third one is to assume the proper meditation posture, ideally the 7-fold posture of Vairochana or any other comfortable posture. And then following that, we go for refuge and generate bodhicitta. The fourth one is we make a petition to the merit field. The 7th one is we making the 7-limb prayer together with mandala offering. And then the 6th one is that we make further petitions. So when we make those further petitions, as we have said, there are different ways of making the petition. We can make the petition to all of the the figures of the merit field, or once we have consolidated all the figures into the main figure, we recognize the main figure as being the figure that encompasses all objects of refuge. And at this point, we make a series of requests. And this request finished by saying, I make a request to you, Buddha Vajradhara, the Supreme Guru Yidam, synthesis of all objects of refuge. Okay, so we're at this point of making these further petitions at the end of the further petitions. And then you reflect. All countless mother sentient beings and myself, having taken rebirth in samsara, have undergone for a long time various and intense sufferings. This is due to the fault of not having cultivated a determined mind wishing to be liberated from all samsara after having understood that its nature is suffering. So it says, why is it that myself and everybody else, we're still experiencing suffering? Well, it is because we have not cultivated this mind that is determined to leave samsara behind. This is why we're still here. Therefore, I beseech you, Supreme Guru Yidam, bless us so that all sentient beings and myself can generate a determined mind, wishing for the liberation from all samsara, after having understood that its nature is suffering. So you see here, we formulate the petition, the request. What is it that we are requesting? And the text continues, due to this fervent request from the body of the Guru Yidam, at the crown of your head descends nectar together with the 5-color light, which enter in you as well as in all mother sentient beings' bodies and minds. So you have invited the main figure, it has come and merged with the Guru on your head, and due to your request, you visualize the descent of purifying nectars. Okay, so it purifies all negativities and obscurations collected from beginningless time. In particular, it purifies all spirits, illnesses, obscurations, and negativities that hinder the generation of the determined mind, wishing for being liberated from all samsara after having understood that its nature is suffering. Our bodies become limpid, clear, and luminous. All good qualities such as merit, lifespan, and so forth improve and expand. In particular, imagine that a determined mind wishing for liberation from the whole samsara, after having understood that its nature is suffering, is generated in all our minds. So this is the preliminaries, and from this point on, we continue with the actual session where we do the meditation. Okay, so we begin now the actual meditation practice. So the actual meditation practice is so that we can generate the wish to be liberated. And in terms of doing that, we have to do two things, reflecting on the general samsaric suffering and reflecting on on specific suffering. So it is meditation on suffering to generate that wish to be free, right? So first of all, we do general and then we do specific. The specific will involve considering the suffering of humans, gods, and demigods. We do not need to do, again, meditation on the suffering of the three lower migrations because we have done this in the path that is shared with the individual of the small scope. So we're going to begin with reflecting the general suffering of samsara, and this is presented in 6 topics. The first one is that there is uncertainty. The second one is that we are not satisfied. The third one is that we have to cast away our bodies again and again. The fourth one is that we have to be conceived and reborn again and again. The fifth one is that we will fall from high states to the lower states. And the sixth one is that we will have no companions. So this is the general, contemplating the general shortcomings and sufferings in samsara. Okay, so as you can see, we're in the actual practice, which is divided into 2, reflecting on the general samsaric suffering and reflecting on specific suffering. So for the first one, reflecting on the general samsaric suffering, it says, as for the first one, whilst meditating on the Guru Yidam on the top of your head, contemplate as follows. So you have established this visualization with the Guru at the top of your head, and whilst you have this visualization, this is what you're contemplating. It says, although I have attained the state of a fortunate migrations, being which transcends the suffering of unfortunate rebirths, due to having practiced correctly the morality refraining from the 10 non-virtuous actions, if I don't attain liberation, and so forth. So you see what it's doing here with the first sentence? Actually, it is linking with the previous section. What was your previous meditation? Previous meditation was meditation that is shared with the path of the individual of the small scope. And there we had this meditation on the suffering of unfortunate migrations and the law of cause and effect. So you're just connecting with all that. And you say, although I might have avoided all this, if I don't attain the liberation, which transcends completely all samsaric suffering, so here you start with a new subject, okay? I will not be safe, since this happy rebirth of mine never stops, even for an instant. So what you consider here is that perhaps I have escaped all the suffering of the lower migrations. For the time being, I am born in as a human. That's a good rebirth. But this is only a temporary relief. And when this life finishes, I might as well go and fall and start again with the suffering of the lower migrations. So it says, take, for example, a criminal that is sentenced to death after 1 month. So you have something who has done a very negative action. They have gone through the court and they're going to be executed after 1 month. His sentence also entails that until that day, that person has to undergo every day the torture and the intense suffering of drops of hot pitch being dropped on him, on his body, as well as being beaten with a stick. So the death that will come at the end of the month is certain. However, every day during this month, the person also has to undergo other additional type of suffering. So there is beating involved and some sort of torture, as we can see. But it says, although a powerful person could intercede for him and succeed in sparing him of those tortures, since he knows that each day anyhow gets him closer to his death, he could never relax at all. So, okay, someone intervenes for that person, spares him the daily torture, but the person still cannot relax because they know that at the end of the month, death is certain. So, cannot relax. In a similar way, as long as someone has not attained the liberation in which all sufferings have been completely uprooted, no matter which fortunate rebirth states one may attain, once the good karma that has propelled the fortunate state is exhausted, one will have to fall in the 3 unfortunate rebirth state and will have to experience for a long time various intense suffering. So I might have a good rebirth now, but when this karma is exhausted, I will fall again into the lower migration. So I'm like that prisoner. I cannot relax. Furthermore, as long as one has attained rebirth in samsara due to karma and afflicted emotions, that cannot transcend the nature of suffering. So as long as you are born due to karma and afflictions, that rebirth in samsara does not go beyond suffering. Why? So now we're going to look at those 6 types of suffering in samsara. It begins by saying, since friends can transform in enemies and enemies in friends, we cannot trust the benefit and harm they do. Okay, so it begins with the suffering of uncertainty. And it says, you know, in your previous life, you might have some excellent friends. But when you come into this life, this same person now comes into this life and acts as an enemy. Or an enemy that you have in this life, in the next life, might come as a very good friend. So there is uncertainty in terms of friends and enemies. There is also uncertainty in terms of your place of rebirth. So you might be reborn now as a god or a human and so forth. However, you will, the next rebirth you would take after that is going to be a rebirth in the lower migrations. Again, from the lower migrations, you take another rebirth and you might ascend and get a good rebirth as a god or a human. So uncertainty, again, in terms of the place of your rebirth. Also, there is uncertainty in terms of your resources. In your one life, you have all the wealth that you want, and then in the next life, you find yourself being born as a beggar and vice versa. So the first fold of uncertainty. Okay, so we are talking here about this contemplation of one of the sufferings of samsara, that is the uncertainty in terms of rebirth, uncertainty in terms of status, and so forth. So we have a story from the time of the Buddha. One time the Buddha went out on alms in the area of Magadha. The area of Magadha is, central India. And there he arrived at the household and he could see, the man of the house. He was sitting and eating fish, and he had a young child in his lap. And someone came, the Buddha came into that household, and someone came and asked the question to the Buddha to please reveal, with his powers of clairvoyance, being able to look into past lives, to please reveal, who were the people in that scene, right? So the Buddha explained, and he says, okay, so you see, you have a person here who is eating fish. So that flesh of fish that he's consuming right now, that is the flesh of the person who was his father in his previous life. His father, the father of this person, when was still alive, he was living in that house, and next to the house there was a pond that had quite a lot of fish, and the father used to like quite a lot the fish, so he was spending a lot of time by the pond. He would catch fish and eat fish, and then many times he would be reborn as a fish in that pond. Then he would be reborn as a human living next to the pond and eating fish. So the father had actually been reborn as a fish a number of times. And at that particular time, the father had died, had been reborn as a fish, and now we see the son eating the flesh of the father who is reborn as a fish. Next to this man who was eating the fish is a black dog. And the Buddha revealed that the black dog was actually the mother of this person. So once that mother was alive, she didn't keep the 10 non-virtuous actions. She didn't practice morality. And also she didn't used to be very generous. If anyone would come into the house, she didn't want to offer them anything. And when she came to the time of her death, she generated great attachment for the household, for the family. And therefore, she was reborn as that black dog that is now living in that family, in that property, isn't it? So she's next to his son. And once the son finishes eating the flesh of the fish, gives the bones to the dog, who is his mother. So interestingly to see that both the parents did not obtain another human rebirth. The father was reborn as a fish, the mother was reborn as a dog. Okay, now we say that at his lap, this man is having a little child. Okay, so how was this child born? So this person has a wife, and there was another man who was greatly attached to this wife, and he started a relationship with her. And when the husband actually caught them in the act, he became very angry and he killed that person, the lover of his wife. And that lover of the wife, although he was dead, he was still attached to that woman. So he came back as the son of that woman, all right? So this is what the Buddha revealed. He says, he eats his father's flesh and eats his mother. The enemy he killed sits on his knees. A wife knows her husband's bones. Samsara can be such a farce. All right, so we're going to stop here for tonight because we already finished our time. So as we say, we try to generate the mind that wishes for liberation from samsara. And in order to do this, we have to contemplate suffering. We will contemplate suffering in general, and then we will contemplate specific types of suffering. So we have started with this presentation of general thinking about suffering, and we are talking about the first one, which is uncertainty. So we will continue in the next session next week with suffering. Okay, there's another thing that Geshe wanted to mention. There is a person who asked about some commentary and instructions on the preliminary practices. Preliminary practices here meaning refuge, prostrations, 100-syllable mantra, the offering of mandala, prayers of Mitsema, and so forth. What Geshe will do, he will incorporate and will give a little bit of information during the session so that we don't take too much time out of the session, but at the same time we proceed. We have some progress with that extra information. Okay, thank you. We stop here for tonight.